Welcome to another episode of the Apex Perspective podcast. Today, I have the absolute pleasure to speak with Naveen Jayakumar, who is currently the principal engineer at Amazon. Now, Naveen has led largely a technical career, and up until the point where he became the principal engineer at Amazon. But Naveen, can you tell me more about your background, why you chose to become technical first, and then, of course, more about how you ventured into becoming the principal engineer at Amazon?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. First of all, I'm happy to be here, sharing my background and my perspective. Thank you for the opportunity. So I I studied engineering, but I did not I don't have a computer science background. But I was always very interested in computer science. So it's something that I learned outside of my my studies, outside of my own interest. So that's
Very
when
interesting.
everything started. So when I was looking for a job, I was only looking for a tech job,
Yes.
even though my studies was not in computer science. So yeah, I started out of my own interest, basically.
Okay.
And the reason why I chose tech is I think I loved creating something digitally, and making it useful for people to use. That kind of gave me a satisfaction, something that I can create and give it to people to use. That's primarily why I think I loved this job. And the sort of thinking that you need to write code, develop software, is different from
Yes. Very different.
thinking. So that, I think I liked that part. Even today, even I'm a principal engineer, I'm still connected to the details. I write code every day.
Sure.
Even though I work on high level stuff as well. So that's something that I really love doing. And I think that's another reason why I chose tech.
Excellent.
And I continue to be in tech. I did not venture into people management ever, because I love this.
Right. So what was interesting is you said you had a degree in engineering specifically, and you ventured into computer science subsequently out of your own interest specifically. Did you have to do what work did you have to do to close a gap to be able to understand computer science, even though you got a degree in engineering?
A lot of self-learning. So
Wow.
this
This
was
is purely
more than 20
self-learning?
years ago. It was truly self-learning. Yeah, it was more than 20 years
Wow.
ago. I think things were different back then. I would go to my university's library and study every day, and that's how I started. Yeah.
That's very impressive. How did you self-teach computer science? I think I've never heard of that before, by the way, amongst my technical friends.
Yeah, I think I started learning, developing applications, small applications. I don't think when I started, I had very good grasp on theoretical knowledge. Because I liked creating stuff, creating applications that's usable for users. No, I started creating some applications and things like that, and learn different languages. That's how I started. I think when I really started, got the grip on basics is, I think, when it actually started working. That's when I needed to go deep into understanding tech, and slowly I gain knowledge over the years.
Well, for someone to spend extra time to learn a new skill set, which is particularly the computer science, you'd have to have a specific kind of drive because you're doing this alongside the engineering degree. What was the drive that compelled you to stay probably long time in library studying this particular subject?
I think the drive was one, definitely curiosity, and being able to write code and that gets transformed to something visually was,
Hmm.
I think, was magical at that point. At that time, I felt. I think I really
Hmm.
enjoyed that.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
So the idea that you can create something, and in terms of a platform, in terms of an application, just via coding, that itself is inspiring enough for you to spend all that extra time alongside your current degree to learn this new subject.
yeah, definitely, yes.
So at what point were you able to have the technical expertise to actually apply to companies or enterprises?
Um, I think at one point I started learning C++ and C and .NET. Those were the languages I started learning when I was in college.
Hmm.
And at some point, I started going deep into learning C++, more than just the basics, out of sheer interest. And I think that helped me get my first job. Which was primarily on C++.
Mm.
Um, that's that was my Yeah. I think that helped me get into the tech. I really needed to be depth in at least one, and I chose that at the time.
Hmm.
Things have changed. It's been 20 years now, so it wouldn't be the same today. But I think um, yeah. So
Yeah.
just being able to develop applications, it's easy these days. Anyone can do,
Hmm.
but going deep and understanding one thing, I think definitely helps.
Understood. Understood. And then at some point, you joined Amazon as an application software development engineer, and you were focusing on risk management specifically. So, what did that really entail for you? Was it different from what you've done before, or how did you adapt to that?
So I think when I joined Amazon, Amazon was back then definitely much smaller than what it is today. Um, but it was definitely much bigger than my previous company.
Hmm.
The scale of systems, the scale of customers that we handle is vastly
Significantly higher.
different, significantly higher here.
Yeah.
And that meant a lot of things. So quality was very important, software quality. When you're
Hmm.
affecting millions of customers, then even a small mistake can cost a lot, in terms of customer trust, in terms of, I don't know, financial. So the scale was very different. I think because of that, I had to learn a lot of things, especially uh, safety, developing high quality software, a
Hmm.
lot of guardrails around it. It's not just about, at that point, it's not just about writing code and making things work. It's much more
Hmm.
beyond that,
Hmm.
because operational excellence is very important. Um, you can write software, but you need it to be bug free. You need it to be resilient. So all of that, uh, I needed to learn.
Hmm.
And I was a junior engineer at that time. I had a lot of opportunity to learn.
Right.
So yeah,
Excellent.
the risk detection itself, I kind of learned over the years the business aspect of it a little bit, but
Hmm.
my role was primarily tech. So yeah.
So, what did you learn in those earlier years regarding the business side of risk assessment or risk management?
So when we talk about risk management, I think it's so we want to identify. So I was in fraud detection basically, right? So we want to identify fraudulent transactions. At the same time, we want to reduce false positives. Reducing false positives is very as important as identifying fraudulent transactions. I think getting that balance was the trickiest part of all.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think I would
Excellent.
highlight that aspect.
Excellent. And at the point where you became a senior software engineer, that's when you started leading other engineers on their own development and probably within the company specifically. So at that point, you had to really understand internally what was required for different roles. What was it like mentoring other specific engineers on their own path, especially at the same company?
Yeah. So once I was not a junior engineer anymore, got some experience, learned a lot, building some high scale systems. I think that's when you get to a point where you can kind of mentor other engineers
Mm-hmm.
to to help them get to that point as well. Um, so I became an SD2 at some point in Amazon, and I started mentoring other junior engineers. You start with interns, then you start mentoring junior engineers. I think um, the so one thing that I learned is being respectful of what choices others have made.
Mm.
In retrospect, you may think it's wrong, but being in that position, um, you need to be respectful of the choices people have made. I think
Mm-hmm.
understanding how others make choices,
Mm.
and understanding why, as opposed to um, you
I
know
think it's wrong.
pointing out
Yeah.
what's wrong. Hey, you should not do this, you should have done
Okay.
it this way. I think that
Very
was
interesting.
important. Being more empathetic, um, and that helps in gaining more trust, be able to lead others with empathy. I think those are some of the things.
I'm sure it came into play later on as a principal software engineer. I think that trust and the capability to lead with trust is a critical component to leadership success in business. And this is not just applicable to leading teams, but rather whole companies as a whole, essentially. So going on to becoming a principal software engineer or principal engineer, it appears that you have managed teams on the global level specifically. What skill sets were required to be able to do that? And what were the key action steps to do it properly?
So one, you want to be a technical leader, um, as in you will be dealing with engineers of all levels, right? Principal engineers all the way to new engineers, and you need to be able to operate at all levels as well. So I should be able to help a junior engineer solve a small problem, and I should be able to solve an architectural problem as well. Being able to connect it to the details and be able to help engineers at all levels, and be able to provide career advice, be able to provide advice on navigating things at all levels is still important. I think it's very easy to talk at a high level and be
Mm-hmm.
hand wavy, but it's very hard to be connected to the details and be able to talk at that level for everybody.
Because everyone's at different
That
stages.
is, I'm sorry, come again?
Because everyone's at different stages and doing different things. You have to understand.
Yes, right, yes.
Okay.
That, you know, you gain a lot of trust with all levels of, folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is important. So essentially, I think being connected to the details is important. Being a leader, it's you should be ready to operate at any level.
Mm-hmm. And you've done
That's
this
important.
not only in the US, but you've done this on the global level. How do you connect people who have different cultures than you as well? Because that is a component I understand. I've interviewed people who are in mergers and acquisitions, and when there's a global mergers, there's a different clash of culture sometimes, and sometimes that can affect operations. How did you deal with that change of culture? And was it the same process as how you deal with people in the US?
Mhm. I think what helps is being connected to people. If you're geographically not located together, maybe you want to travel and meet folks. That helps definitely. And different culture, it definitely helps because it brings diversity.
Hmm.
People think differently, can
Right.
provide solutions differently.
Wow.
That definitely helps, and you want to keep the diversity alive.
Hmm.
Um, and what also helps is very clear vision for your team or product for your organization, so that everybody is clear what's their goal and everybody can work towards it. Um, if your teams are distributed globally, I think having a clear vision and goal is important.
Okay. And did you have to learn
Getting
anything
everybody.
specific? Absolutely. And did you have to learn anything specifically new when you're leading larger teams and larger development projects as the principal engineer? Did you learn any new skill sets, or was this something you just went into and you learned along the way?
So my expertise is in cloud architecture, specifically for e-commerce.
Hmm.
And e-commerce is a very complex business, especially
Yeah.
if you're talking about international e-commerce. There are so many different countries, different regulations. It's connected to the physical world as well, shipping and returns and everything. So it's a very complex business. And there are things that I learned specifically, definitely on the job, by learning from others.
Okay.
I think the architecting software that can be extended for future is, I think I would say, one of the important things that I learned.
Hmm.
It's easy to architect for what you want to do today,
Okay.
but it's hard to architect in a way that it makes it easy to change in the future. You can
Mm.
never predict future. I can never say what's the future
Right.
requirement is going to be. I think the art is here is designing it in a way that you can change it easily in the future.
Hmm.
And you also want to develop the intuition of what could be the future,
Right.
how, in
And
what direction, potential direction things could go. I think that
mhm,
intuition helps designing it in a way. Yeah.
mhm. What changes in the future would require you to amend the systems, or what would require you to amend what you're currently doing?
I think one usual thing is scale.
Scale?
For a company like Amazon that has been growing, yeah, that has been growing a lot. Today, you may, you know, say you build a website that can handle 1,000 customers, and let's say your business grows very well and you go viral, and let's say next year you want to handle million customers, right? That scale will need changes,
Yes.
and not just changes to architecture, changes to your processes, how you handle issues, how what guardrails you want to have, what's the quality bar you want to achieve. Everything changes by that time.
Hmm.
So that is obviously one. The other one is, for a business like e-commerce, the business um, requirements change a lot sometimes. Let's say you want to, tax rules change, some delivery partner changes. There are so many things that can change where you need to change your systems as well. You want to
Okay.
be in a state where changing what you have already built is cheaper
It's and it's possible.
and is possible. Yeah.
Excellent. So what I want to do now is, and by the way, I really appreciate you for sharing these perspectives. I think that these were definitely ones I had not considered before. Combining both the technical aspects and also the leadership principles, I think are very, very important to understand. And especially at the larger enterprise level, it's very interesting. And I think the concept you brought about the architect systems is there are going to be various changes happening within an organization, and particularly one like Amazon, in terms of scale, in terms of features potentially, in terms of potentially or new potential developments, and that's why I think amending it and the capability of amending it is very, very important. But what I like to do now is go ahead and shift this conversation to more about you, Naveen. And the first question I have for you is, what is something about you or about your life that you would like more people to know about you?
Um, I think, yeah, I think the aspect that I mentioned where, I think if you focus on what you're passionate about, um, I think that will. So for me, I started, as I mentioned, I did not have a tech background. Started learning by myself,
Mhm.
and that helped me stay in the uh, stay in the field and be able
Mhm.
to contribute in this field and feel fulfilling. Right. I think that aspect of me, I think I would like to share. I think encourage people to do.
Absolutely. And I would agree because if you really don't know why you're doing something, the amount of effort you put into it is going to be a lot less. If you know you're clearly passionate about something, you could do something radical like you've done, which is completely self teach yourself everything required for computer science, and then therefore getting into tech jobs. That's a very difficult task that I would say very small percentage of the population can even think of doing, is what I'll say. But if you have a clear reason as to why you want to do something, the amount of effort you're going to put in and the amount of nights you're going to spend actually working towards that particular purpose is going to be a lot greater. And I actually did a TED talk on this subject about finding your why. I think that knowing what you're
Mm,
passionate about, knowing why you're passionate about it, is going to be critical to making sure you're doing what's required. Because a lot of what you want to achieve in this life, the requirements are a lot higher than you initially think they are. So I'd like to say that's a very good point, and I think that's something people can take away from your particular story is that I think you're spending extra time and your free time learning a completely new subject, and that's for a particular reason that you're passionate about it. You have the idea of getting something new, something compelling just via code, and that self-inspired you a lot. And I think that's an important perspective that you provided. So what I'll do now is go ahead and share a quick perspective regarding fitness and health, and we'll go and conclude the podcast with Naveen's plans for this year, whether that's professionally or that's personally. My perspective that I really want to share today is really about challenging the perceived requirements of what it takes to make a physical transformation. A lot of individuals believe that in order to make a physical transformation, it has to be you going to a gym 4 to 5 times a week. And why this is such a
mhm,
inadequate perspective is because of one reason. Because not every individual, especially my audience who are entrepreneurs and executives, can always go to the gym 4 times a week. That includes commute, that includes taking a shower, that includes all those extra times you're spending. And that totals up to, I would say, over 10 hours a week. And not, I would argue, most people cannot really adhere to that if they're doing something important in their lives. So how can you really restructure making this happen in a very time efficient way? You have to identify the requirements first. What are the requirements that actually allow you to achieve this goal, and then identify a pathway that's far more efficient. If you look at the real mechanism behind fat loss, or even fat loss specifically, there's one main requirement. It's a negative energy balance, and what that means is you have to get the right amount of movement and combine that with the right calorie intake. And out of these two, what takes up time is the movement. So you have to restructure to be extremely time efficient. And what I would recommend is leveraging something like step count, because that's something you can do anytime and anywhere, as opposed to in one fixed location. You can do it while you listen to this podcast. You can do this while you're traveling. You can do this essentially anytime and anywhere that you have the capacity to. As long as the ground underneath you, you can do this. And that is why it's extremely important to challenge those requirements. Now, I got a lot of input recently about putting on muscle specifically. It's the same concept. A lot of people think you need to do a lot more than that's actually required. If you went to the gym once a week, or even 20-30 minutes a week, and you got stronger than you did last week, you're making far more progress than you would be making if you spent 4 times a week going to the gym, but you did not get stronger than last week. The key behind muscle growth is getting stronger and having adequate protein. So the idea behind this is you have to identify the requirements first and figure out different pathways to achieve those requirements in the most simple way possible. And I think if a lot more people did that, there'd be a lot more individuals inclined to make a physical transformation. And that's my point of view. Is instead of adopting what is told to you, question things, understand them, and then figure out better pathways to do it. And that's really the perspective I want to share. And this is exactly what I use to make my own physical transformation. So hopefully that was valuable to the audience and gave a different perspective. What I'll do now is go ahead and shift this conversation back to Naveen and to learn more about his plans for this year, whether it's professionally or personally.
Yeah, thanks for the perspective that you shared about you.
Mhm.
So my plans for this year. So a lot is changing due to the Gen AI based coding tools. Um,
Mhm.
it's easy to develop a software today, especially something small scale and proof of concepts. You don't need to be an engineer to do that.
Mhm.
I think that's changing. That's creating a lot of changes in the industry now. Um, there is still, developing enterprise level software is still very complex and hard to do.
Mhm.
These tools help a little bit, but they are not there yet to entirely replace everything, all the coding. Um, this is one thing I want to get better at this year. I
Mhm.
think I would like to understand how to, which we already do, develop using these tools, but using them more effectively for the enterprise level software development, and learning the limits, learning how to um, automate some of the software development processes,
Mhm.
how to do it safely. I think it's very challenging to do it safely. You can
Mhm.
let a tool deploy software, but you need to have number of guardrails to be able to do that. So
To do it
I think
accurately.
this is the yes,
Mhm.
and definitely yes, and this is the area that I would like to explore, understand,
Mhm.
and be able to get a sense of what it takes to develop uh, uh, you know high highly critical software using these tools and be successful at it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Naveen. I really appreciate it. This was Areen Mohindra and Naveen Jayakumar